Captain Jake Morrison stood at the big window of his ship and looked down at the dead planet below. The world called Kepler 442c spun slowly in the darkness of space, and Jake could see the broken cities and twisted metal that covered its surface. This planet used to be home to millions of aliens called the Zilani, but now it looked like a graveyard. Jake had been a ship captain for 15 years, and he had seen many terrible things in space, but this planet made him feel sick inside. 3 months ago, the void sickness had come to this world and destroyed everything. The sickness was not like any disease that doctors knew about. It changed the very air and ground and made reality itself go crazy. "Sir, we are getting some life signs from the north part of the planet," said Lieutenant Amy Crawford from her seat at the control panel. Amy was young, but she was very good at her job, and Jake trusted her completely. "The big alien council said there was nobody left alive down there, but I think they were wrong." Jake looked at the numbers on his screen and felt his heart beat faster. The Galactic Council had sent 3 different alien species to try and save people from this planet, but they had all failed badly. The bug-like Threx aliens had landed first with their strong shells and group mind thinking, but the planet's poison air had made their shells melt away in just 6 hours. Then the energy beings called Luminari had tried to help, but they had disappeared into the sick air in only a few minutes. Even the rock-hard Corvin aliens with their smart computers had given up after half their team died. "Get the landing team ready," Jake told his crew. "We need full protection suits and all emergency plans ready to go." Dr. Lisa Chang walked over to Jake with worry on her face. She was the smartest person on the ship when it came to alien life, and Jake always listened to what she had to say. "Jake, the air down there is full of weird radiation that should kill any living thing made of carbon. Are we really going to try this?" Jake looked at all the scary numbers on his tablet again. The void sickness had turned the planet's air into a mix of deadly particles and reality-bending energy. Where other alien species saw certain death, Jake saw a puzzle that needed solving. He had always been good at solving puzzles even when other people said it was impossible. "The council thinks we are crazy for even thinking about going down there," Jake said quietly to Lisa. "But those life signs we found mean someone is still alive after 3 months of this nightmare. We cannot just leave them to die." Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez looked up from his workstation with worry in his eyes. Bobby had been fixing ships for 20 years, and he knew when something was dangerous. The ship's computers are already having problems just from being this close to the planet. Whatever is down there is worse than anything we have ever seen. Before Jake nodded because he knew Bobby was right. The Galactic Council had put a big warning sign on this planet and told everyone to stay away. No more rescue missions were allowed because too many good aliens had already died trying to help. But humans had never been good at following rules like that, especially when innocent people needed help. "Linda, plot us a path down to the surface," Jake commanded their navigator, Linda Torres. Linda was the best pilot Jake had ever worked with, and if anyone could get them safely to the planet, it would be her. "We are going down to get those survivors." As their ship called Terra Nova broke through the planet's sick atmosphere, Jake could feel the hull shaking under the attack of impossible energies. The other alien species had come to this world with their best shields and fanciest technology, only to watch helplessly as their equipment broke down and their people died horrible deaths. Jake thought about how humans were different from all the other species in the galaxy. The aliens were all better than humans in different ways. The Threx were stronger and could think as one big group mind. The Luminari could control pure energy with their thoughts. The Corvin were smarter than any computer and could solve any math problem. But humans had something else, something that Jake was beginning to think might be more important than all those other gifts. The ship shook harder as they got closer to the surface, and Jake could hear metal groaning under the stress. Through the windows he could see the planet's surface covered in colors that hurt to look at, and shapes that made no sense. This was a world where the normal rules of reality did not work anymore. It was a place that had driven other species to madness and death. But Jake Morrison was human, and humans had always found a way to survive in places where they should not be able to live. From the frozen north of their home planet to the burning deserts to the deepest oceans, humans had spread everywhere. They did not do it by being the strongest or the smartest. They did it by refusing to give up and by changing themselves to fit whatever challenge they faced. Beginning final approach, Linda called out as warning lights flashed all over the bridge. Everyone hold on tight because this is going to be rough. Jake gripped the rail and watched the impossible landscape rush up to meet them. Somewhere down, there in that chaos of broken reality, people were still alive and waiting for rescue. The greatest alien civilizations in the galaxy had tried and failed to save them. Now it was humanity's turn to try. The landing team had 6 humans, and each one was picked for being good at different things. As they flew down toward the surface in their smaller ship, Jake could see through the windows that this planet was much worse than any of them had imagined. The ground moved with colors that did not have names, and the shapes of buildings bent in ways that made his eyes hurt to look at them. Sergeant Maria Gonzalez sat in the back, checking her weapons for the 5th time since they had started going down. She was their soldier, and it was her job to keep everyone safe, but she looked worried. "This place feels wrong, Captain. Like the whole world is sick and angry." Dr. Tony Kim was their science expert, and he was writing down numbers from his machines as fast as he could. The little screens on his equipment were flashing red warnings and making beeping sounds. "The weird energy field is making space and time go crazy." The bug aliens wrote that their navigation computers stopped working in just a few minutes after they landed. "Good thing we are not using their fancy technology," said Steve Johnson, who was flying their small ship through a storm of purple lightning. Steve had been a pilot for 10 years, and he knew how to fly by feeling and instinct when the computers could not help. Sometimes the old simple ways work better than all the fancy new stuff. Their ship touched down near where the strongest life signs were coming from. It was close to what used to be a research building made by the Zilani aliens. The building was made of crystal, but now parts of it seemed to exist in different realities at the same time. Some walls were solid, while others looked like ghosts, and Jake could see through them to places that should not exist. When they stepped out onto the alien ground, communications specialist Rachel Morgan immediately started feeling the effects that had driven other species completely crazy. The world around them flickered like a broken television. The ground felt real one second and like walking on air the next second. The sky changed colors without warning, and sometimes there seemed to be 2 or 3 skies all at once. "I am getting a signal," Rachel reported, and her voice stayed calm even though reality was going insane around them. "It is very weak, but it is definitely from the Zilani aliens. Someone is still alive in that building." Dr. Chang was running her medical scanners over everything, and the readings made no sense according to normal science. The other alien species tried to fight this weirdness with technology. They brought energy shields and reality stabilizers and quantum armor, but it all failed because they were trying to make order out of chaos. Jake understood what she meant. The Threx had brought their group mind thinking to solve the problem, but the void sickness had broken their shared consciousness into pieces. The Luminary had tried to blend with the strange energies and been absorbed into them completely. The Corvin had tried to use logic and math to understand the dimensional maze, but got lost in problems that had no answers. "We are going into that building," Jake decided. "Stay close to each other and stay alert. Do not trust what your eyes show you. Trust what your gut tells you instead." As they walked toward the research building, the air around them started to shimmer with something that felt alive and mean. The void sickness was not just poison in the environment. It was something that hated and wanted to hurt any thinking creature it found. It seemed to target the mind and consciousness itself, trying to drive beings insane or destroy their sense of self. Other alien species had brought their greatest strengths to this world and watched those strengths become weaknesses that got them killed. The Threx unity became a problem when the sickness corrupted their group mind. The Luminary energy forms were eaten up and twisted into something evil. The Corvin logic was turned into endless loops of crazy thinking that trapped them. But as the human team got closer to the building, something strange happened. Jake noticed that the reality storms seemed to have less effect on them than they should have. When the ground tried to disappear under their feet, they just kept walking. When gravity suddenly changed directions, they rolled with it and kept moving forward. When time seemed to slow down or speed up, they just adjusted their pace. "Hey, Captain," said Bobby Martinez as he helped carry some of their equipment through air that was thick like water one moment and thin like vacuum the next moment. "You notice we are not going crazy like the report said we should," Jake had noticed. According to all the data from the other rescue missions, humans should have been dead or insane within minutes of breathing this air. Their minds should have been shattered by the impossible sights around them. Their bodies should have been dissolved by the reality-warping radiation. But instead, they were just adapting to each new weirdness like it was just another problem to solve. Maria Gonzalez was walking point and using her soldier training to watch for threats that might not even exist in normal space. "Movement ahead," she called back to the others. "Something is coming out of the walls, but I cannot tell if it is real or just another illusion." Through the twisted architecture of the research building, they could see shapes moving that might have been the void, entities or might have been shadows cast by light that came from impossible directions. The building itself seemed to be alive and aware of their presence. Corridors changed length while they were walking through them, and rooms rearranged themselves when no one was looking directly at them. But the humans just kept moving forward step by step, adapting to each new impossibility with a flexibility that seemed to surprise even them. They were beginning to discover what made their species different from all the others in the galaxy. Inside the research building, the normal rules of how things worked had completely stopped making sense. Hallways led to places that could not exist, and rooms had their own weather happening inside them. The laws of physics only worked when they felt like it. The human team moved through this nightmare with growing confidence, adapting to each new impossible thing with the kind of toughness that had carried their species across the stars. They found the survivors deep inside the building, in a laboratory that still had some protection from the worst effects. There were 12 Zilani researchers who had somehow lived through 3 months of the void sickness attacking their world. The aliens looked very different now. Their crystal bodies had dark energy running through them like black veins, and their once perfect geometric shapes had been twisted into curves that looked more like living things. Dr. Kethvara was the leader of the Zilani scientists, and when she looked up at the humans, her eyes held pain that no creature should ever have to feel. When she spoke, her voice made sounds that hurt the humans' teeth and made them feel sick to their stomachs. "You should not have come here," she whispered in the common language that most galaxy species used. "The void eats everything that lives. We watched 3 rescue teams fall to its hunger. Your species does not have the natural defenses that the others had." Dr. Chang knelt down next to the alien scientist, and her medical scanner showed just how much the Zilani had been changed by their exposure to the sickness. "You are still alive, and that is what matters most. We came here to take you away from this place." Kethvara made a sound like glass breaking that might have been laughter. "Alive, yes, perhaps we are still alive. But we are not unchanged. The void has made us into something new, something that exists between different realities. We cannot leave this place now, because we are connected to it just like it is connected to us." Sergeant Gonzalez was watching the doorway with her enhanced reflexes that let her track movement in dimensions that did not quite exist in normal space. "Captain, we have got company coming. Something is moving through the walls toward us." The void entities started to appear around them like nightmares becoming real. They were beings made of pure hate that existed in the empty spaces between thoughts. They had destroyed the other rescue missions by finding each species' greatest strength and turning it into a weapon against them. The Threk's unity became a weakness when it got corrupted and poisoned. The luminary energy forms were sucked up and twisted into something evil. The Corvin logic was bent into endless circles of madness. But as the entities surrounded the humans, something happened that they had never seen before. Instead of finding one main weakness to attack and corrupt, they found something they had never faced. The humans had adaptability itself as their main trait, and that was much harder to turn against them. Jake felt the void pressing against his mind like cold fingers, trying to find something to grab onto in his thoughts. But where other species had rigid mental structures that could be broken, humans had something far more dangerous. They had the ability to change and evolve and become something new in response to any challenge that faced them. "Form up around the survivors," Jake ordered quietly. "We are taking everyone out of here right now." Tony Kim was helping one of the weaker Zilani stand up, while his instruments screamed warnings about reality breaking down around them. "The readings are off the charts, but we are still functioning. How is that even possible?" The void entities moved closer, and Jake could feel their confusion and growing anger. They were used to breaking their enemies quickly by finding the one thing that defined them and corrupting it. But humans were not defined by any single thing that could be easily turned against them. Maria Gonzalez had her weapon ready and was backing toward the exit while keeping the entities in sight. These things do not like that we are not falling apart like the others did. I think we are making them angry. Bobby Martinez was carrying medical supplies and helping support 2 of the injured Zilani survivors. You know what the real difference is between us and all those other species. They came here trying to win. We just came here trying not to lose. The entities rushed forward in a wave of reality-destroying energy that should have unmade the humans at the atomic level. But instead of being destroyed, the humans simply absorbed the attack and kept moving. Where other species would have been instantly killed, the humans treated it like just another obstacle to work around. Dr. Chang was monitoring the life signs of all the survivors, human and alien alike. We are all showing changes from exposure, but we are adapting to it instead of being destroyed by it. The void cannot seem to find anything solid enough in us to grab onto and break. Steve Johnson was leading the way toward their escape route, while carrying the most severely injured Zilani on his back. Other species brought their best technology and their strongest abilities. We brought our stubbornness and our ability to just keep going no matter what. The void entities followed them through corridors that existed in 7 dimensions at once, but they seemed unable to stop the humans from moving forward. Every attack they made was absorbed and adapted to. Every trap they set was worked around or walked through. The humans were not fighting the chaos around them, they were becoming part of it while still remaining themselves. Rachel Morgan was maintaining contact with their ship while helping guide the group through passages that led in directions that had no names. Terra Nova, this is landing team. We have the survivors and we are heading for extraction, but this place is not going to let us go easily. As they neared the exit, the building itself seemed to wake up and become actively hostile. Walls moved to block their path and floors tried to open up into bottomless pits. But the humans just adapted to each new challenge with a flexibility that seemed to make the void entities more and more frustrated. Getting everyone out of the building became a fighting retreat through a structure that was actively trying to stop them from leaving. Walls moved by themselves to create dead ends where there had been clear paths just seconds before. Gravity changed directions without any warning, making people fall toward what used to be the ceiling. Time itself moved in broken, stuttering loops that made it hard to tell if they were moving forward or backward through the same moments over and over again. The void entities chased them through dimensions that could only be seen from the corner of the eye. These creatures could destroy consciousness itself with just a touch, and they had used this power to kill the other rescue teams that had tried to help the Zilani. But the humans kept adapting to each new horror with a kind of flexibility that seemed almost supernatural. When corridors became impossible mazes, the humans marked their path with simple scratches on the walls that somehow stayed constant even when reality shifted around them. When gravity betrayed them, they used their natural athletic ability to jump between surfaces that should not have been able to hold their weight. When time became unreliable, they trusted their internal body clocks and the steady beating of their hearts to guide them. Steve Johnson was carrying the weakest Zilani survivor on his back while walking through a stairwell that existed in 7 different dimensions at the same time. Somehow he was finding solid places to put his feet on surfaces that were only theoretical. You know what the real difference is between us and them, he called back to the others. The other species tried to understand this place first. We are just trying to get out of it alive. Dr. Kim was helping another survivor walk while his scientific instruments screamed warnings about reality breaking down in ways that should have killed them all instantly. The Threx brought their technology and group mind thinking. The Luminary brought their energy control powers. The Corvin brought their super-advanced logic systems. We brought our refusal to quit. Behind them, the void entities were getting more and more frustrated and angry. Their usual methods of attack had always worked before. They would corrupt what made each species special, then absorb what was left, or drive it insane. But human minds refused to be put into simple categories that could be easily broken. Humans were not defined by any single trait that could be turned against them. They seemed to be defined by their refusal to be defined at all. Maria Gonzalez was covering their retreat with her weapon that fired special ammunition designed to work in multiple realities at once. "Coming up on the shuttle," she reported through their communication system. "But we have got a big problem waiting for us. The landing area is not clear." Through the building's twisted windows, they could see their shuttle surrounded by the worst manifestations of the void sickness. Reality. Storms swirled around the landing pad that could unmake solid matter at the level of individual atoms. Any normal approach to their escape vehicle would be immediate suicide for any known form of life. The other alien species had faced similar situations and been forced to retreat or die. The Threx had tried to use their collective intelligence to find a safe path, but the void had corrupted their group mind and turned it against them. The Luminary had attempted to harmonize with the chaotic energies and been completely absorbed. The Corvin had tried to calculate a logical solution and become trapped in mathematical paradoxes with no answers. Jake Morrison looked at the swirling chaos between them and safety, and made a decision that showed exactly what made humans dangerous in a universe filled with species that were supposedly superior to them. Instead of trying to outthink the problem or overpower it with advanced technology, he chose to do something that no other species would ever consider. "Everyone link up hand to hand," he ordered his team and the survivors they were protecting. "We are going to walk straight through that storm." Dr. Chang looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Jake, that reality storm will destroy us at the molecular level. No form of matter can survive direct exposure to that kind of chaos." "Maybe not," Jake replied while taking the hand of the nearest Zilani survivor. "But we are not going to try to survive it. We are going to become part of it just long enough to get through to the other side." The humans and their alien charges formed a chain of linked hands and walked directly into the reality storm that surrounded their shuttle. Where any other species would have been instantly destroyed by forces that could remake the fundamental laws of physics, the humans did something that defied all scientific understanding. They absorbed the chaos into themselves. They let it flow through their minds and bodies without trying to resist it or control it. Instead of fighting against the impossibility, they embraced it and made it part of themselves temporarily. The Zilani survivors were protected by being in direct physical contact with the humans, who somehow acted like living shields against the reality-destroying energies. The void entities could only watch in complete bewilderment as their ultimate weapon failed against opponents who treated the impossible as just another challenge to overcome through pure determination. The humans emerged from the other side of the storm changed but not broken. They had absorbed some of the chaos and made it part of themselves, but they remained fundamentally human. Bobby Martinez helped load the last of the survivors into their shuttle while reality continued to break down around them. "I do not understand how we just did that, but I am not going to question it right now." Linda Torres fired up the shuttle's engines and began their ascent toward the Terra Nova waiting in orbit above, all passengers secure and ready for immediate departure. "I suggest we get out of here before this place decides to try something else." As they lifted off from the surface, Jake looked back at the research facility that was already fading back into the chaotic landscape of the dying world. They had done what 3 other superior species could not do. They had gone into hell itself and brought out survivors. The Terra Nova broke away from orbit around Kepler 442c, with all the survivors safely aboard, leaving behind a world that would remain forever scarred by the void sickness. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Chung worked without stopping to help stabilize the rescued Zilani, while the human crew dealt with their own exposure to forces that should have destroyed them completely. The physical effects on the humans were surprisingly minor considering what they had been through. Some of their cells had changed in small ways, and they had developed new neural pathways in their brains that let them see reality's flexible nature more clearly. The psychological effects were deeper and more interesting. Each team member now carried within themselves a small piece of the chaos they had faced integrated into their consciousness like a vaccine against madness. Jake sat in his private office working on his report for the Galactic Council. This document would become famous throughout the galaxy, not because of its technical data, but because of how simply and directly it explained human survival abilities. The Council had been studying humans for decades, trying to understand what made them special, but they had never really figured it out. Dr. Chang knocked on his door and came in carrying her final medical reports on everyone who had been on the mission. The Zilani are going to live, she told him with relief in her voice. Their transformation from the void exposure is becoming stable instead of getting worse. Kethavara says they will be forever changed by what happened, but they are alive, and that is more than any other rescue mission managed to achieve. Jake nodded and turned his computer screen so she could read what he had written. The Council wants to know how we succeeded where 3 supposedly superior species failed completely. They want to understand our so-called tactical advantage over everyone else. Chang sat down in the chair across from his desk and read the key, part of his report out loud. Human beings survive not because we are stronger or smarter or more technologically advanced than other species in the galaxy. We survive because we are fundamentally broken by our evolutionary history. Our development occurred under such harsh and chaotic conditions on our homeworld that adaptability became our defining characteristic. We do not have natural armor, like the rock-hard Corvin, or collective consciousness, like the group-minded Threx, or energy manipulation abilities like the Luminari. What we have instead is the ability to become whatever we need to become moment by moment in response to any threat we face. The void sickness could not destroy us because there was no fixed version of us to destroy. We are already chaos that has been controlled and directed by will and determination. Chang was quiet for a long time, thinking about what she had just read. Do you think they will understand what you are trying to tell them? Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. Probably not at first. They will run more tests and create more theories and try to measure what makes humans special in their laboratories. They will miss the point completely because they are looking for something concrete and measurable. Through the big windows of his office, the stars moved in their ancient patterns, completely indifferent to the struggles of the species that traveled between them. Somewhere out there in the darkness, other threats were waiting. Forces that would challenge the established order of the galaxy, and entities that would test the limits of what consciousness could endure and still remain sane. When those challenges came, the galaxy would call upon its strongest species and its most advanced civilizations and its most sophisticated technologies to deal with them. And when those efforts failed, as they inevitably would, there would be humans ready to walk into the storm and emerge with whoever could be saved. Dr. Chang stood up to leave, but stopped at the door. What do you think will happen to us now that word gets out about what we did down there? The same thing that always happens, Jake replied while looking out at the stars. Other species will try to copy what we do without understanding why it works. They will create training programs and develop new technologies and write academic papers about human adaptability. But they will never really get it because they cannot change their fundamental nature the way we can. The Terra Nova continued on its course toward the nearest council station, carrying its precious cargo of survivors and the growing reputation of human resilience. Behind them, Kepler 442c kept spinning in space, a world forever changed but no longer completely alone in its suffering, because someone had cared enough to try. Back in the medical bay, Kethavara was talking to some of the human crew members through a translation device. Her crystalline form was still shot through with dark veins from her exposure to the void, but her voice was stronger than it had been on the planet. We studied your species for many years before this happened, she told Bobby Martinez, who was helping her adjust to the ship's artificial gravity. We read your history and your scientific papers and your cultural works, but we never understood what made you different. Now we know. What did you figure out? Bobby asked while checking the readings on her medical monitors. You are the only species we have encountered that defines itself by its refusal to be defined, Kethavara explained. Every other race in the galaxy, including ours, has core characteristics that make them what they are. We are creatures of logic and crystal harmony. The Threx are collective minds in insect bodies. The Luminari are pure energy given consciousness. But humans are chaos that has learned to think and feel and choose. Bobby thought about that for a moment. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It is the thing that saved our lives, Kethavara replied. And probably the thing that will save many more lives in the future when other impossible challenges arise. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council on the massive space station that served as the center of interstellar government. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Hall, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that represented the diversity of intelligent life in the galaxy. But today, all their attention was focused on the small group of humans who had done what everyone said was impossible. The Threx delegation sat in their section, clicking and buzzing in their group language, as they tried to understand how creatures they considered primitive had succeeded where they had failed. Their collective intelligence was vast and their technology was advanced, but they could not grasp how individual minds working separately could be more effective than their unified consciousness. The luminary representatives flickered between different energy states as they processed the information about the human rescue mission. These beings of pure light had existed for millions of years and had powers that seemed magical to younger species, but they had been completely helpless against the void sickness that the humans had simply walked through. In the Corvin section, massive rock-like beings ran calculations on quantum computers built into their silicon bodies, trying to find the mathematical formula that would explain human success. Their logic was perfect and their reasoning was flawless, but they could not reduce human adaptability to numbers and equations that made sense in their ordered view of the universe. Council leader Zephon was an ancient being whose species had been exploring space when humans were still living in caves on their home planet. His voice carried the weight of eons when he spoke to the assembly. "We have reviewed the reports from the Kepler 442c rescue mission multiple times. The facts are clear, but the explanation remains elusive. How did humans accomplish what our most advanced species could not?" Jake stepped forward to address the council, and he felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon him. "Honored delegates, we succeeded because we approached the problem differently than everyone else. Where you brought your greatest strengths, we brought our greatest weakness and turned it into an advantage." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembly as translators worked to convey Jake's words into dozens of different languages and communication methods. The concept he was trying to express did not translate well into the rigid thinking patterns of most galactic species. Dr. Chang joined Jake at the speaking podium and activated a holographic display showing brain scans and biological data from the rescue team. Other species have evolved specialized traits that make them excellently adapted to specific environments and challenges. Humans evolved in chaos and constant change, which made us generalists instead of specialists. The Threx representative spoke in their harmonic group voice. "Specialization is efficiency. How can lack of optimization be superior to perfect adaptation? Because perfect adaptation to one environment means death in a different environment," Jake replied. "You brought your group mind to a place that attacked consciousness itself. The luminary brought their energy forms to a dimension that consumed energy. The Corvin brought their logic to a realm where logic was turned into madness. We brought our ability to change and become something new." Council leader Zephon leaned forward with interest. "You claim that your weakness is actually strength. This contradicts all evolutionary theory and strategic thinking." Bobby Martinez stepped up to speak, and his words carried the simple wisdom of someone who had lived through the impossible. "With respect, sir, that is exactly the problem. You are all thinking about this like it is a strategy or a theory. We did not think our way out of that nightmare. We felt our way out of it. We adapted in real time to threats that could not be understood or predicted." The Corvin delegate's voice was like grinding stone when it spoke. "Adaptation without understanding is random chance. How do you achieve consistent results from chaos?" Maria Gonzalez answered with the directness of a soldier who had faced the enemy and won. "We do not achieve consistent results. We achieve results, period. Sometimes we win by being smart, and sometimes we win by being stubborn, and sometimes we win by being lucky. The important thing is that we keep trying until something works." A new voice spoke from the observer section where the rescued Zelani survivors were sitting. Dr. Kethvara had requested permission to address the council, and her words carried special weight because she had witnessed human effectiveness firsthand. "Honored council members, I have spent the last 6 months studying my rescuers, and I believe I understand what makes them unique." The hall fell silent as all attention focused on the alien scientist whose crystal form still showed the dark veins, left by her exposure to the void sickness. "Every species in this galaxy defines itself by what it is. Humans define themselves by what they can become. They are not creatures of fixed nature, but creatures of endless possibility, Zephon considered. Her words carefully. This suggests that humans are not truly a stable species at all, but rather a form of controlled evolution. That is exactly what we are, Jake confirmed. We change ourselves to meet whatever challenge we face. Sometimes the changes are physical, and sometimes they are mental, and sometimes they are spiritual. But we never stop changing, and that makes us very hard to destroy. The council debated for hours trying to understand the implications of what they had learned. Some delegates argued that humans were too unpredictable to be trusted with important missions. Others suggested that human adaptability should be studied and replicated in other species. A few wise voices pointed out that the ability to change could not be copied because it required abandoning the very specializations that made other species what they were. In the end, the council reached a decision that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Humans would be given equal status with the founding species and would be called upon when conventional solutions failed. It was an acknowledgement that sometimes the galaxy needed creatures who specialized in having no specialization at all. As Jake and his team left the council chamber, they knew that their species had just been handed a responsibility that would define humanity's role in the galaxy for generations to come. They would be the ones who went into impossible places and did impossible things, not because they were the strongest or smartest, but because they refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. The rescue of Kepler 442c had proven that when all else failed, humans endured, and in enduring they made survival possible for others. It was a simple truth that would echo across the stars for as long as humans traveled among them.